A small clay doll was pulled from 300 feet beneath the Idaho earth. This is the Nampa Figurine, an artifact that should not exist according to our history books. By the end of this journey, you will understand why this single tiny object threatens to shatter the entire timeline of human presence in the Americas. We will investigate whether it is a genuine relic from an impossible age or a clever hoax buried in a geological misunderstanding. How do you prove something that rewrites everything we think we know? The year was 1889, and the small town of Nampa, Idaho, was a place of quiet industry. The crew was not searching for treasure or ancient relics. They were drilling an artesian well, a deep hole to reach a pressurized aquifer that would bring water to the surface. Their tool was a sand pump, a long pipe driven into the earth that would bring up cores of material from the depths. It was hard, gritty work, focused on layers of soil and rock, not history. Then, from a depth of 320 feet, the pump brought up something utterly unexpected. Along with the expected blue clay, a small, hardened object tumbled out. It was a human figurine, just over 1.5 inches tall, crafted from the same clay that surrounded it. Imagine the moment of confusion. A worker's hand, caked in mud, picks up this tiny, detailed sculpture. It showed a woman with a distinct shape, with what looked like a headdress or carefully styled hair. This was not a rough pebble or a curious rock formation. It was clearly, unmistakably made by human hands. The well's owner, a man named J.C. Robinson, was summoned. He must have stared at the object in his palm, a perfect artifact from an impossible place. How could a man-made object be buried under 300 feet of solid earth? It defied all common sense. The initial reaction was likely a mix of awe and profound disbelief. Was it a joke, a trick of the light? But the evidence was literal, sitting right there in the clay. Recognizing the potential significance, Robinson soon sent the figurine to a prominent geologist at Boston's Society of Natural History. This was not a decision made lightly. He was handing over a mystery, one that would immediately pit the simple physical evidence against the entire established understanding of human history in the New World. The stage was now set, not for a simple identification, but for a scientific controversy that would echo for over a century. The figurine itself is a masterpiece of miniature artistry. It stands just under 2 inches tall, small enough to be completely hidden by a closed hand. The material is a simple, local clay, but it has been fired, hardened by heat into a durable ceramic state. Its form is unmistakably and intentionally human. You can clearly see a rounded head, a defined torso, 2 arms resting at its sides, and 2 legs, but it is the details that truly captivate. The face, while worn, suggests carefully modeled features. There is a pronounced nose, and the head is shaped with what appears to be a headdress or an elaborate hairstyle, carved with precise lines. The body shows subtle contours, hinting at clothing or perhaps ceremonial adornment. This is not a child's crude mud figure. Every curve and incision speaks of deliberate craftsmanship, of an artist who knew exactly what they wanted to create. When experts first held it, they noted its surface was coated in a thick layer of iron oxide, the same reddish stain that colors the surrounding clay layers. This patina was not painted on. It was chemically bonded to the artifact from centuries, perhaps millennia, of burial. In appearance, it shares a family resemblance with ancient fertility figurines found across Europe and Asia, those iconic Venus statues, yet it was unearthed in the heart of North America. Its very existence in that place at that depth presented a quiet, physical question that no textbook could easily answer. To understand the full weight of this discovery, we must look at the ground itself. The well's walls were a history book written in stone and soil. The figurine did not come from some loose, mixed layer of dirt near the surface. According to the driller's logs and subsequent geological surveys, it was extracted from a specific stratum of blue clay. And this blue clay layer was not near the top. It sat far beneath a formidable barrier, a cap of solid lava rock known as basalt, 15 feet thick. Beneath that basalt were dozens more feet of ancient sand and gravel deposits. This sequence is not random, it is a locked geological timeline. Each layer represents a distinct chapter in Earth's history, laid down over immense stretches of time. The basalt layer is a key. It formed from a volcanic flow that once covered the landscape, a catastrophic event that sealed everything beneath it in a tomb of stone. For anything to be found below that basalt, it had to have been there before the lava ever poured across the land. Geologists identified these deep strata as part of the Glens Ferry Formation, a vast geological unit that dates to the Pliocene epoch. Now, the Pliocene epoch is not just old, it is almost incomprehensibly ancient by human standards. We are talking about a time roughly 2 million years ago. To put that in perspective, our own species, Homo sapiens, would not appear for another 1.8 million years. The accepted story of humans crossing into the Americas begins a mere 15,000 years ago. So here lies the devastating contradiction. If the stratigraphy is correct, if the figurine was truly in place within that 2-million-year-old blue clay and sealed by the basalt, then its presence rewrites the entire narrative. It suggests a human, or at least a hominid, artist was shaping clay figurines in Idaho at a time when, according to all mainstream science, only early proto-human ancestors were walking the plains of Africa. This is not a small adjustment to the timeline, it is a complete shattering of it. The geology presents a seemingly airtight case, a timeline locked in stone that points to an impossible artist. That tiny clay figure was quickly sent east into the hands of experts who could make sense of it. The artifact arrived at the Boston Society of Natural History, landing on the desk of a respected geologist named George Frederick Wright. He was not a fringe theorist, but a mainstream scientist with a keen interest in both geology and human antiquity. Wright examined the figurine with intense scrutiny. He noted the deep iron oxide stains embedded in its pores, a chemical signature matching the blue clay layer from which it came. This coating could not be faked or applied recently. It was the result of a long, slow chemical marriage with the surrounding earth. More importantly, he trusted the detailed reports from the well drillers. The stratigraphy was clear, the layers were undisturbed. To Wright, the evidence was compelling and straightforward. He became one of the figurine's most vocal scientific defenders, publishing a paper on the discovery in the prestigious journal The American Antiquarian. His conclusion was startling. He believed the Nampa figurine was a genuine relic from the Pliocene epoch, a time before the last ice age had even begun. This was not a quiet hypothesis, it was a direct challenge printed in an official scientific record. The reaction from the wider academic community was a turbulent mix of open-minded curiosity and profound, entrenched skepticism. Some scholars were fascinated, willing to follow the physical evidence wherever it led. They saw the meticulous documentation and agreed the artifact presented a legitimate, if baffling, problem. Others, however, reacted with immediate disbelief. The idea of humans in America 2 million years ago was so radical, so violently at odds with every other piece of archaeological data, that they found it easier to question the discovery itself. Could the drillers have made a mistake? Could the figurine have fallen from a higher, more recent layer into the drill hole? The debate was not between sober scientists and wild fantasists. It was a genuine conflict over how to interpret a piece of evidence that simply did not fit the established story. This initial scientific reception proves the Nampa figurine was never simply dismissed as a hoax. It was treated as a serious anomaly, one that forced experts to choose between trusting the geology in front of them or protecting the historical timeline they believed was true. Yet for every piece of evidence, a counter-argument must be heard. The most persistent and logical explanation from skeptics is simple: the Nampa figurine is a hoax. Could this entire mystery be nothing more than a prank, a bored worker's joke that spiraled out of control? The idea is compelling because it requires no rewriting of history. Imagine a laborer on that drilling crew, perhaps someone with a knowledge of local artifacts, who slips a small clay doll into the drill hole or the sand pump. Maybe it was a trinket from his own pocket, a souvenir purchased from a nearby Native American community. The motive need not be grand, perhaps simple amusement or a desire to cause a stir. At a depth of 300 feet, who could possibly verify where it truly came from? The mechanics of a hoax are disturbingly plausible. 19th century drilling operations were not the sterile, monitored procedures of today. They were loud, muddy, and chaotic. A small object could have been accidentally dropped into the open borehole from the surface, or deliberately placed into the sand pump before it was lowered. Once the pump brought up the clay and the figurine together, the association would seem undeniable, even if it was a recent addition. This theory casts a shadow of doubt on the men who found it. Were they credible witnesses, or were they prone to exaggeration or deceit? While no evidence suggests the foreman, J.C. Robinson, had anything to gain from a forgery, we cannot automatically dismiss human nature. The desire for fame, or even just the thrill of being part of a remarkable discovery, can sometimes cloud judgment. Furthermore, the drilling technology itself presents a potential loophole. The sand pump operated by creating a powerful suction, pulling up material from the depths. Some geologists have argued that a heavy, dense object like a fired clay figurine could not have been sucked up from such a great distance. It would have been left at the bottom. This implies that if it came up with the pump, it must have entered the system much closer to the surface. The hoax hypothesis, therefore, is not a fringe idea, it is the safeguard of conventional history. It insists that the simplest answer is usually the correct one, and that an elaborate geological mistake or a human trick is far more likely than a 2-million-year-old human artist in Idaho. This skepticism is the necessary counterweight, the voice that demands extraordinary evidence for an extraordinary claim. But the geological date is only half the story. The true depth of this mystery is measured not in feet of Earth, but in millennia of human history. To grasp the full scale of the problem, we must place this tiny Idaho figurine against the vast, sweeping timeline of how humanity is believed to have populated the Americas. The mainstream scientific consensus is clear and well supported. Near the end of the last great ice age, roughly 15,000 years ago, global sea levels were much lower. This exposed a vast land bridge, a 1,000-mile-wide corridor of grass and tundra connecting Siberia to Alaska, known as Beringia. Across this bridge, small bands of Paleolithic hunters are thought to have migrated, following herds of mammoth and bison into a new world. These were the first people, the ancestors of all indigenous cultures in the Americas. Their journey marked the beginning of a human story here, a story that archaeology tells through distinctive stone spear points left at ancient campsites like those at Clovis, New Mexico. This Clovis first model has been the cornerstone of American archaeology for generations. It paints a picture of a rapid, pioneering expansion southward, a human arrival that reshaped continents in just a few thousand years. Now hold that established image in your mind. The Nampa Figurine, if its geological context is genuine, does not merely nudge this timeline back by a few centuries. It obliterates it. A date of 2 million years does not just predate the Clovis culture. It predates our entire species, Homo sapiens, by over 1 million years. At that point in deep time, the most advanced human ancestor walking the earth was likely Homo habilis, a small-brained tool user in Africa, not a sculptor in North America. This is not a puzzle piece from the wrong box, it is a piece from a different game entirely. The artifact suggests a presence so ancient that it exists in an epoch when, according to all fossil and genetic evidence, no human or even proto-human lineage had left Africa, let alone traversed the frozen extremes of the Arctic to reach Idaho. This is the core of the anthropological impossibility. The figurine is not simply old, it is impossibly out of place, a single, silent witness claiming to have been present for a chapter of the human story that, according to every other record, was never written. The Nampa figurine does not stand alone in its defiance. It belongs to a peculiar category that historians and archaeologists have dubbed OOP arts, or out-of-place artifacts. These are objects, sometimes startlingly advanced, that are found in geological strata or archaeological contexts where they simply should not exist according to mainstream timelines. They are the loose threads in the tapestry of history, suggesting stories we have not yet learned to read. Consider the London hammer, a tool with an iron head and a wooden handle discovered encased in solid rock in Texas in the 1930s. The rock formation was dated to over 100 million years old, a time long before humans evolved. Or the Koso artifact, a spark plug found inside a geode that was claimed to be 500,000 years old. Then there is the Antikythera mechanism, a breathtakingly complex bronze gear system recovered from an ancient Greek shipwreck. While its existence is not denied, its sophistication in simulating astronomical cycles was so advanced that it seemed centuries ahead of its time, a technological leap that left historians scrambling for an explanation. Each of these objects, in its own way, whispers a tantalizing question: what if our timeline is incomplete? The Nampa figurine, however, holds a distinct and powerful position within this strange family. Its documentation comes from the very dawn of modern scientific archaeology, with detailed logs from a civil engineering project. Its context is not a vague claim, but a specific, mapped geological column of blue clay and basalt. This gives the figurine a kind of credibility that other, more loosely documented anomalies lack. It transforms the artifact from a mere curiosity into a formal, documented challenge. When viewed alongside these other OOP arts, a pattern begins to emerge, not of a single mistake or hoax, but of a recurring, nagging inconsistency in the story we tell about our past. The figurine becomes part of a chorus of silent witnesses, each one suggesting that human history, or perhaps the history of intelligence on this planet, might be far deeper, far more mysterious, and far more complicated than any textbook has ever dared to suggest. The debate needed a champion, and it found one in a man of formidable reputation. George Frederick Wright was not a fringe enthusiast but a professor of geology at Oberlin College, a respected scientist who had spent years mapping the glacial deposits of North America. His work gave him a profound understanding of how the Earth layers itself over time, and when the Nampa figurine came to his attention, he applied that exact expertise. Wright did not rely on second-hand reports. He traveled to Idaho, examined the well site, and interviewed the drillers himself. His conclusion was unwavering: the artifact was genuine. He laid out his full defense in his influential 1912 book, The Origin and Antiquity of Man. Within its pages, Wright presented a meticulous three-part argument that skeptics have wrestled with ever since. First, he emphasized the undisturbed nature of the strata. The basalt cap was solid and intact, a geological seal that proved nothing from the surface could have worked its way down. The figurine had to be older than the lava flow that entombed it. Second, he pointed to the iron oxide coating, a stain chemically identical to the blue clay and baked into the very pores of the ceramic. This was not surface dirt. It was a mineral signature proving the object had rested in that specific ancient layer for an immense period. Finally, he tackled the hoax theory head-on by questioning motive. The drillers were simple laborers focused on a practical job. They had no background in archaeology, no apparent desire for fame, and nothing to gain from an elaborate deception. To Wright, the simplest explanation was the truth. The object came from the ground exactly where they said it did. Yet Wright's perspective was shaped by more than just geology. He was also a proponent of theistic evolution, a belief that divine guidance worked through natural processes like evolution. This world-view made him uniquely open to discoveries that suggested a deeper, more complex human story, one that might not fit neatly into the rigid timelines being constructed by his purely secular colleagues. For Wright, an artifact like the Nampa figurine was not a threat to science, but an invitation to expand it, a physical clue that humanity's journey might be far older and more mysterious than we yet understood. His defense, grounded in fieldwork yet framed by his philosophical openness, ensured the figurine would never be easily dismissed as a mere curiosity. But what does modern science have to say? The story of the Nampa figurine did not end with George Frederick Wright or the debates of the early 20th century. As decades passed, new technologies emerged that promised to finally solve the mystery. Techniques like thermoluminescence dating could, in theory, determine the last time the clay was exposed to intense heat, revealing its true age. Microscopic analysis could examine the iron oxide crust, searching for pollen grains or microscopic plant cells that would pinpoint the exact geological era. Yet here we encounter the most frustrating chapter in this entire saga. For all our advanced tools, we have almost no modern data. The primary reason is heartbreakingly simple: the artifact itself has largely vanished from the public eye. After its initial study, the figurine passed into private collections. Its current whereabouts are uncertain, reportedly held by descendants of the original owner, inaccessible to researchers. This is a common and tragic fate for many controversial artifacts. They become locked away, more a family heirloom than a scientific specimen. Even if it were available, there is a profound institutional reluctance to test such a destabilizing object. Major museums and universities operate within established paradigms, investing time, money, and reputation into analyzing an item that, if proven genuine, would overturn foundational narratives is a risky proposition with little professional reward. It is far safer to let sleeping mysteries lie, so we are left with a haunting speculation. What could we learn if the figurine were subjected to a full battery of 21st century tests? Thermoluminescence dating could settle the age debate decisively. Analysis of the mineral composition in the clay body could be matched against geological maps to see if it truly originated from that deep blue layer. A scanning electron microscope could probe the wear patterns, looking for evidence of ancient handling versus modern tool marks. But without the object, these are just ghosts of answers. This lack of closure, this absence of a modern verdict, is ironically what keeps the mystery most alive. It exists in a permanent state of potential, a question mark that neither skeptics nor believers can fully erase. The Nampa figurine remains suspended between two worlds, its truth guarded by time and silence. The trail of the artifact grows cold after its initial burst of scientific attention. Following its examination by George Frederick Wright and other curious scholars, the Nampa figurine did not find a permanent home in a major museum collection. Instead, it drifted into a shadowy realm of private ownership. Records indicate it was displayed for a time at the Idaho State Historical Society, allowing the public to see this puzzling relic for themselves. But eventually, it was returned to the family of the original discoverer, J.C. Robinson. From that point forward, its journey becomes murky. It is believed to have been passed down through generations of the Robinson family, treated more as a unique heirloom than a piece of world heritage. There are no recent photographs, no published studies from the last 50 years, and no public record of its current custodian. For all practical purposes, the most challenging archaeological artifact in North America has simply vanished from view. This absence creates a vacuum filled with theories. Some believe it was accidentally lost or destroyed, a fragile clay object that could not survive decades of casual handling in a drawer or display case. Others speculate it rests in a safety deposit box or a private home, its significance perhaps forgotten by its owners. A more tantalizing idea suggests it is intentionally kept private, shielded from a scientific establishment that its holders believe would dismiss it out of hand. Whatever the truth, this physical disappearance is devastating for resolving the mystery. Without the object itself, modern science is powerless. We cannot apply thermoluminescence dating to determine its true age. We cannot use a scanning electron microscope to analyze the mineral crust on its surface for ancient pollen. We cannot even perform a simple material composition test to see if the clay matches the deep strata of the Glens Ferry Formation. All we have are century-old descriptions, a few grainy photographs, and the unwavering geological reports from 1889. This transforms the Nampa figurine from a tangible piece of evidence into a ghost, a story we tell. Its absence actively fuels both sides of the debate. Skeptics argue that if it were genuine, it would be in a museum undergoing constant study, its disappearance proof of its insignificance or fraud. Believers counter that the establishment has no interest in an object that upends its narrative, so it has been conveniently sidelined and forgotten. The figurine's physical silence, therefore, becomes its loudest argument, a permanent question mark hanging over history. We are left chasing a shadow, debating the provenance of a ghost, and wondering if the key to rewriting human history is sitting unnoticed on someone's dusty mantelpiece. So where does this leave the figurine's lonely claim? If we dare to accept its geological context as genuine, we are forced to confront a truly staggering possibility. It would mean that a human hand shaped this clay not 15,000 years ago, but perhaps 2 million. Such a date does not just push back the arrival of the first Americans, it shatters the entire framework of human development as we understand it. This void of explanation is where more speculative and far grander theories rush in. Could the Nampa figurine be a fragment from a world we have forgotten? Some researchers and authors look at this artifact and others like it and see not a mistake but a pattern. They propose a radical rewrite of prehistory, one that includes advanced human civilizations flourishing long before the last ice age, only to be wiped clean by a global cataclysm, like the comet impacts or massive floods suggested by some geological evidence. These are the so-called lost civilizations, cultures with sophisticated knowledge that left only scattered, enigmatic traces. You might have heard names like Atlantis or Lemuria, or the mythical northern land of Hyperborea. In the context of the Americas, some point to legends of ancient seafarers crossing the Pacific, suggesting a precursor culture that influenced both sides of the ocean millennia before the accepted timelines. The popular author Graham Hancock has built a compelling narrative around this very idea, arguing that a highly advanced global civilization existed at the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, and its survivors ceded knowledge to the earliest known cultures like the Egyptians and the Maya. For proponents of these views, an artifact like the Nampa figurine is not an isolated oddity. It is a piece of debris from that lost world, a tiny, hardened whisper of a people who mapped the stars, built with megaliths and created art, only to have nearly all evidence of their existence scoured away by time and catastrophe. The figurine's impossible age, in this light, becomes a key piece of evidence for a human story far older and more dramatic than the slow, linear progression taught in schools. It is a thrilling idea, one that taps into a deep human fascination with forgotten golden ages and epic disasters. Yet we must temper this excitement with critical scrutiny. The major flaw in these grand lost civilization theories is the very thing that plagues the Nampa figurine itself, a profound lack of corroborating evidence. Where are the cities? Where are the tools, the middens of garbage, the burials, the infrastructure? A civilization advanced enough to create art and potentially cross oceans would have left a massive archaeological footprint. Aside from a handful of deeply controversial sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is revolutionary but still only 11,000 years old. That footprint is conspicuously absent. Mainstream archaeology argues that if such a global culture existed, we would have found undeniable, widespread proof by now. The Nampa figurine, rather than proving a theory, instead highlights our desire for one. It is an anomaly so profound that it seems to demand a grand explanation, a complete overhaul of history to give it a home. This is the true power and the enduring puzzle of the artifact. It stands at a crossroads between rigid science and expansive speculation, a single, silent object that makes us question not just when humans arrived in the Americas, but whether the entire story of our past is still waiting to be told. The human mind is not content with a simple mystery. When faced with an artifact that fits nowhere, our imagination rushes to fill the void with possibilities as extraordinary as the object itself. So, what if the Nampa figurine is not a relic of a lost human civilization, but something even stranger? Could it be evidence of visitors from beyond our world, or even from beyond our own time? In the realm of fringe theory, the figurine becomes a prop in a much larger cosmic drama. Ancient astronaut theorists, popularized by figures like Erich von Däniken, might look at this tiny sculpture and see a familiar pattern. Their hypothesis suggests that extraterrestrial beings visited Earth in the distant past, interacting with primitive humans, sharing knowledge, and perhaps even inspiring our art and technology. In this framework, the figurine could be a representation of one of these star travelers, or an object crafted by humans under their influence, left behind millions of years ago as a kind of forgotten calling card. It is an idea that transforms the artifact from a historical anomaly into a piece of interstellar archaeology. An even more mind-bending speculation involves not space but time. What if a time traveler from our future or a distant parallel past visited the Pliocene landscape of Idaho? Perhaps as a scientific surveyor or a curious tourist, they accidentally dropped a personal trinket, a small memento from their own era. That trinket, this clay figurine, then became buried and fossilized, waiting to be discovered in an age that would find it utterly inexplicable. These stories are thrilling. They tap directly into our love for science fiction and our deep-seated wonder about the unknown. They provide a neat, almost cinematic solution to the problem, one that does not require rewriting human evolution, but instead expands the universe of players. It is a narrative of intervention, of outside forces shaping our story in ways we are only beginning to glimpse. However, this is where we must gently but firmly land back on the solid ground of scientific methodology. These theories, while captivating, belong almost entirely to the realm of speculation and popular culture. They are what we might call arguments from incredulity, born from the belief that the artifact is so out of place that only a supernatural or ultra-advanced explanation can suffice. Science, in contrast, operates on a principle often called Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation that fits all the facts is usually preferable. For a scientist, inventing an entire race of ancient astronauts or the existence of time travel to explain one small clay doll is not just a leap, it is a vault over a canyon of unproven assumptions. It introduces far more complex questions than it answers. Where is the corroborating technology? Where is the physical evidence of their vessels or their passage? The scientific method demands testable hypotheses and reproducible evidence, things these grand narratives simply cannot provide. Yet, to dismiss these ideas entirely is to miss their cultural significance. The very fact that the Nampa figurine inspires such wild speculation is a testament to its power. It has escaped the confines of academic journals and become part of our modern mythos, a seed crystal for stories about who we are and where we come from. These fringe theories are not scientific explanations, but they are powerful reflections of our desire for meaning, our hunger for a universe that is stranger and more wonderful than our textbooks allow. They show that some mysteries are so potent they refuse to be contained by conventional answers, demanding instead that we dream a little bigger. Yet the ground beneath Nampa holds stories far older than the written record. To truly understand this place, we must listen to the voices that have known it the longest, the indigenous peoples of the Snake River Plain. For tribes like the Shoshone and Bannock, this landscape is not a blank slate waiting for discovery. It is a living chronicle woven into their creation stories and oral traditions. Their deep history here stretches back thousands of years, long before European contact. Within their cosmology, the world and its people have undergone great cycles of change and emergence. Some of their ancient narratives speak of a time when different beings or earlier peoples inhabited the land, stories that are often metaphorical but are rooted in a profound generational memory of place. Could a discovery like the Nampa Figurine find an echo in these traditions? While no specific Shoshone-Bannock legend mentions a tiny clay doll, the overarching idea of deep antiquity is central to their worldview. Their presence itself is a testament to an ancient lineage in this very region. This invites a fascinating and perhaps more grounded reinterpretation. What if the figurine is not 2 million years old, but still astonishingly ancient by conventional standards, say 10 or even 15,000 years? This would place its creation at the very dawn of human presence in the Americas, a time shrouded in the mists of prehistory that later tribal stories might indirectly reference. It would mean the artist was not a mysterious lost civilization, but a direct early ancestor of the peoples who live there today. This perspective shifts the mystery from a geological impossibility to an archaeological one, asking if we have simply underestimated the artistic sophistication of the first Paleo-Indians. To explore this, we must look at the artifact style. Does it resemble known Native American art? The figurine's simple, rounded form with emphasized features does share a loose, universal family resemblance with fertility figures found in many ancient cultures worldwide. However, within the specific artistic traditions of the Great Basin and Plateau regions, small clay or stone figurines are not commonly documented from the last few thousand years. The iconic art of these tribes is more often found in petroglyphs, intricate basketry, and beadwork. This stylistic absence makes the Nampa figurine an outlier even within the indigenous artistic record. Yet absence is not proof. Perhaps it represents a unique personal object, a ritual item from a very early cultural phase that did not survive into later periods. Or perhaps it was traded from a distant culture with a different artistic tradition, traveling hundreds of miles before being lost. This culturally rooted possibility offers a compelling middle path. It accepts the figurine as a genuine human artifact without demanding a rewrite of planetary history. It suggests the drillers may have encountered an unusually deep but still geologically recent archaeological site, a pocket of ancient sediment that preserved a relic from the earliest chapters of the human story in Idaho. This view honors both the physical evidence and the deep, enduring connection of native peoples to the land. It reminds us that the longest human memories of this continent may still hold secrets that science is only beginning to uncover. Perhaps the deepest mystery of the Nampa figurine lies not in the Idaho clay, but within us. Why does this tiny, contested object hold such a powerful grip on our imagination? The answer speaks to a fundamental human longing, a desire to peer behind the curtain of the official story and discover that the past is far stranger than we have been told. There is a profound appeal in the idea of a hidden truth, a secret chapter of history waiting to be uncovered. It transforms the figurine from a mere artifact into a symbol, a key that could unlock a grander, more mysterious world. This taps into a deep-seated narrative, the story of the lone discoverer or the brave researcher challenging a rigid, dismissive establishment. We are drawn to the possibility that a simple worker with a sand pump could unearth the one piece of evidence that proves they, the experts in their ivory towers, are wrong. It is a classic underdog story written in mud and ancient ceramic. This psychological pull is powerful because it offers more than just new facts. It offers a new mythos, a sense that our reality is richer and more enigmatic than the textbooks suggest. This desire, however, is a double-edged sword that shapes the debate on both sides. Our minds are wired for a phenomenon called confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out and favor information that confirms what we already believe, while dismissing or minimizing evidence that contradicts it. For a believer in lost civilizations or ancient astronauts, every detail of the figurine's discovery becomes a puzzle piece perfectly fitting their worldview. The iron oxide stain is definitive proof of antiquity, the driller's honesty is beyond question, and the skepticism of mainstream science is seen as proof of a closed-minded conspiracy to protect the status quo. Conversely, for the committed skeptic, the very lack of modern testing confirms their suspicion of a hoax. The artifact's disappearance is evidence of its fraudulence, and any geological anomaly can be explained away by a drilling error or human trickery. Both sides can look at the same scant evidence and see a completely different story, each feeling their interpretation is the only logical one. This is not about intelligence or honesty, it is about how the human brain processes mystery. We are storytelling creatures, and we instinctively try to fit new information into the narratives we already hold dear. The Nampa figurine becomes a Rorschach test, revealing more about our hopes and biases than about the distant past. Science at its best is a methodology designed to counteract these very instincts. It is not a collection of settled facts, but a process of relentless questioning, testing, and peer review. A true scientific mindset welcomes anomalies like the figurine not as threats, but as invitations to investigate, to refine, and sometimes to revolutionize our understanding. The tension, then, is not really between science and mystery, but between the comforting stories we tell and the often messy, inconvenient evidence that challenges them. We crave the definitive answer, the satisfying conclusion that puts the mystery to bed. Yet the enduring power of the Nampa figurine may lie in its refusal to provide one. It lingers in that tantalizing space between fact and legend, a permanent question mark that keeps us wondering, searching, and telling stories about who we are and where we came from. For the vast majority of professional archaeologists today, the Nampa figurine is a closed case. The consensus view is not one of heated debate, but of quiet, almost indifferent dismissal. It is filed away not as a revolutionary discovery, but as a historical curiosity, an anomaly best explained by human error rather than ancient artistry. This stance is not born from closed-mindedness, but from the rigorous application of the scientific method itself. At the heart of this dismissal lies a fundamental principle of logic known as Occam's razor, or the principle of parsimony. When faced with competing explanations for a phenomenon, the simplest one that requires the fewest new assumptions is usually correct. Apply that razor to the figurine. On one side, you have an explanation that demands we rewrite 2 million years of human evolution, migration, and cultural development based on a single, poorly documented object. It assumes unknown hominids crossed impossible barriers, developed ceramic technology, and left not a single other trace anywhere on the continent. On the other side, you have the possibility of a mistake, a prank, or a misunderstanding during a messy drilling operation in 1889. One explanation shatters our entire understanding of prehistory, the other involves a board worker or a geological fluke. To science, the choice is clear. The hoax or contamination theory is not just simpler, it is staggeringly more probable. This reliance on parsimony is the bedrock of historical research. Imagine if every unusual object forced a complete overhaul of the timeline. There would be no stable narrative, only chaos. Archaeology builds its story painstakingly, piece by piece, from patterns of evidence, not from lone outliers. And here lies the figurine's greatest weakness, its profound isolation. If humans were sculpting clay in Idaho 2 million years ago, where is everything else? Where are their tools, their campfires, their bones? The entire Pliocene fossil record of North America is filled with the remains of saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, and early horses, but not a single scrap of evidence points to any hominid, let alone a culturally sophisticated one. The figurine stands utterly alone, a solitary sentinel with no army behind it. For mainstream archaeology, this lack of corroboration is fatal. An entire discipline cannot pivot on one tiny, contested data point. Furthermore, the standards of evidence have grown exponentially stricter since the 19th century. Today, any claim of an artifact from a deep context would require impeccable, multi-witness documentation, photographic evidence of the object in situ, and immediate testing by independent experts. The Nampa discovery, for all its period detail, falls far short of modern forensic standards. So, the artifact is relegated to the fringe, not because of a conspiracy, but because it fails the most basic tests of scientific credibility. It is an extraordinary claim without extraordinary corroborating evidence. This institutional dismissal is the reason you will not find the Nampa figurine in modern textbooks. It is why funding is not allocated to search for more evidence, and why most archaeologists see it as a footnote, a lesson in why we must always question first reports and demand overwhelming proof before rewriting history. The mystery persists not in academia, but in the space between that rigorous skepticism and the tantalizing, unresolved questions still embedded in that lump of blue clay. Yet the story of the Nampa figurine did not end with academic dismissal. It found a second, far more vibrant life in the world of popular speculation. The artifact's first major leap into this realm came courtesy of a man named Charles Fort. In the early 20th century, Fort made it his mission to collect reports of phenomena that science could not or would not explain, from strange lights in the sky to falls of frogs from the clouds. He published these in books with titles like The Book of the Damned, where he catalogued the Nampa figurine alongside other out-of-place artifacts. Fort's work was not about proving any one theory, but about challenging the arrogance of scientific certainty. By including the Idaho discovery, he essentially rescued it from obscurity and placed it on a shelf labeled things that do not fit, inviting generations of curious readers to wonder why. This shelf became a cornerstone of 20th century television. In the 1970s, the figurine found a perfect home on the program In Search Of, hosted by the iconic Leonard Nimoy. The show's haunting theme music and Nimoy's solemn narration treated mysteries like the Nampa artifact with a tone of profound wonder. It was presented not as a solved case, but as an open question, a piece of a puzzle that mainstream science had perhaps too quickly abandoned. This framing was powerful. It made viewers feel like detectives on the verge of a breakthrough. Decades later, the figurine became a recurring guest on shows like Ancient Aliens. Here, its narrative shifted again. No longer just an anomalous relic, it was presented as potential evidence for a grander thesis, that extraterrestrial visitors influenced or guided ancient human history. The figurine's impossible age was highlighted, while the plausible explanations like the hoax theory were often mentioned only briefly as a stubborn obstacle to the more exciting truth. This journey from a geological report to a television spectacle reveals a fascinating process. Media, by its very nature, amplifies the sensational. A 2-minute segment on a mystery show cannot delve into the nuanced debates over stratigraphy or the principles of Occam's razor. It must grab attention, present a compelling visual, and leave the viewer with a sense of awe. The figurine, small and enigmatic, is perfect for this. Its image flashes on screen, the narrator speaks of 300 feet and 2 million years, and the implication hangs in the air: what if everything we know is wrong? This is a far more emotionally engaging story than a dry discussion of drilling techniques in 1889. Online, the effect multiplies. Forums and alternative history websites are filled with discussions of the figurine, where it is often cited as definitive proof of a lost civilization or ancient astronauts. In these spaces, the skeptical analysis is frequently downplayed or framed as part of a cover-up, a deliberate suppression of the truth by a rigid academic establishment. This media shaping has a profound effect on our collective perception. For many people today, their entire knowledge of the Nampa figurine comes from these sensationalized portrayals. They remember the mystery, the possibility, the thrilling challenge to authority. They often do not remember the detailed counter-arguments because those are less dramatic. The artifact becomes less a specific archaeological problem and more a symbol, a shorthand for the idea that history is hiding secrets. This is not necessarily a bad thing. It keeps curiosity alive and encourages people to question accepted narratives. But it also creates a distorted landscape where the loudest, most exciting version of the story often drowns out the quieter, more complicated reality. The figurine's true power may lie in this duality. It is a physical object that sparks an endless cultural conversation, a debate less about clay and strata and more about how we choose to confront the unknown. But to truly test the hoax theory, we must travel back to that worksite and examine the machine itself. The technology of 1889 holds the answer. The crew in Nampa was not using a modern rotary drill that grinds through rock. They were operating a sand pump, also known as a well sanding tube. Picture a long, heavy iron pipe, perhaps 8 inches in diameter, with a simple valve at the bottom. This pipe was pounded straight down into the earth by a heavy drive weight, again and again, pulverizing the soil and stone into a slurry. Once it reached a certain depth, the crew would lower a smaller tube, the actual sand pump, inside the outer casing. This inner tube had a one-way clack valve at its bottom. When they dropped this pump down the column and then hauled it up rapidly, the sudden suction would pull the water and pulverized material from the bottom of the hole up into the tube. They would then bring this tube to the surface and dump its contents, a wet, messy mix of clay, sand, gravel, and water. This is the crucial context. The figurine was found in one of these dumps of deep blue clay. Now, could such an object have naturally worked its way down from the surface through 300 feet of dense, layered earth? Geology resoundingly says no. The strata described, including that solid 15-foot cap of basalt, were impermeable and undisturbed. There were no cracks, no animal burrows, no root systems that could carry a heavy clay doll down that far. Natural descent is a physical impossibility. The more plausible contamination scenario involves the machinery or the workers. Could the figurine have been accidentally introduced? Perhaps it was on the ground near the borehole and got kicked in, or maybe it was in a worker's pocket and fell in. If this happened, the object would have had to navigate a complex journey. Once inside the outer casing, it would sink through a column of muddy water until it reached the bottom, where the drill bit was actively crushing rock. There, it would be subjected to tremendous pounding and grinding. A fragile, fired clay figurine would almost certainly be shattered into dust by this process. Even if it survived intact, the sand pump's suction was designed to pull up fine slurry, not large, dense objects. Engineers of the era noted that the clack valve often failed to pick up pebbles or small stones, leaving them at the bottom of the hole. A 1.5-inch clay doll is far larger than the sand and clay particles the pump was meant to lift. For it to be successfully sucked up, it would likely have needed to enter the system much higher, perhaps even placed directly into the sand pump tube before it was lowered. This forensic analysis of the period technology tilts the scales. While a deliberate hoax by placing the object into the equipment is still technically possible, the idea of an accidental introduction becomes far less credible. The machinery itself acts as a filter and a destroyer. For the figurine to emerge intact from 320 feet down, it almost certainly had to be part of the undisturbed matrix the pump was sampling from. The sand pump of 1889, rather than being a source of error, becomes a witness for the prosecution. Its very mechanics make the convenient explanation inconveniently difficult to believe. A single, tangible clue clings to the figurine's surface, a reddish-brown crust of iron oxide. In simple terms, this is rust, the same chemical signature that stains old nails and colors the desert cliffs. For an object buried in the iron-rich blue clay of the Glens Ferry Formation, this coating is exactly what science would predict. If the artifact was fired in an ancient fire, then lay in that damp, mineral-heavy earth for thousands or even millions of years, a slow chemical exchange would occur. Iron particles in the groundwater would seep into the microscopic pores of the ceramic, bonding with the clay body itself. This creates a patina that is not painted on but grown, a part of the object's very substance. It is a process that cannot be rushed. It is the patient work of centuries. Now consider the year of its discovery, 1889. Could a potential forger, perhaps a clever worker hoping to create a sensation, have faked such a coating? The technology of the time was limited. They might have used mud stains or even painted the piece with iron-rich pigment. But to the trained eye of a geologist like George Frederick Wright, a fake would reveal itself. An artificial stain sits on the surface. It can be scratched off. A true, ancient patina is embedded, its color bleeding into the ceramic's core. Wright specifically noted this deep integration, arguing it was powerful evidence of great age. The mystery of the coating is a microcosm of the entire debate. If we had the figurine today, modern science could settle this in an afternoon. A scanning electron microscope could map the iron oxide's depth and bonding. Spectroscopy could analyze its chemical fingerprint, comparing it definitively to samples from the blue clay layer. We could know, beyond reasonable doubt, if the rust was an ancient companion or a modern costume. But we do not have those tests. We are left with a century-old observation, a scientist's notes describing a patina that looked right, that felt authentic. This tiny, rust-colored shell encapsulates the entire frustration. It is a specific material piece of evidence that seems to point toward great antiquity, yet it remains forever just out of reach of the tools that could prove it, a whisper of proof we can no longer clearly hear. The blue clay of Nampa holds a silent, radical proposition. So let us, for a moment, step into a world where the figurine is exactly what it appears to be. Accept its geological age as fact, and watch as the entire map of human history begins to dissolve and reform before our eyes. This is not merely adding a new chapter, it is discovering that the book we have been reading is only a slim volume in a vast, forgotten library. A human hand, or something very like it, shaped that clay in Idaho 2 million years ago. That single act would mean our species, Homo sapiens, is not the author of the human story, but a late arrival to a tale already ancient. The artist would have lived in the Pliocene epoch, a world of warmer climates, with savannas stretching where glaciers would one day form. This places the creator not just before the last ice age, but before the entire Pleistocene epoch, the so-called Ice Age period that shaped our familiar prehistory. Who could they have been? The only hominin known to exist anywhere on Earth at that time was Homo habilis, the handyman, a small-brained bipedal creature in Africa known for making simple stone tools. The idea of Homo habilis, a being barely removed from the apes, not only leaving Africa but traversing the Arctic and mastering the complex technology of firing clay into ceramic, is, by current understanding, laughable. It would force a complete re-evaluation of their cognitive and cultural capacities. Or perhaps it suggests an entirely unknown branch of the hominin family tree, a lineage that developed in parallel, reaching a level of sophistication in the Americas that we have never dared to imagine. The migration itself becomes a staggering puzzle. 2 million years ago, the Bering Land Bridge likely existed, but the environment would have been brutally harsh, a far cry from the mammoth steppe of later migrations. The journey from Siberia to Idaho would have been an epic, multi-generational saga of survival across an alien landscape, undertaken by a creature we think of as a primitive scavenger. And then there is the technology. Firing clay is not an instinct, it is a discovery. It requires understanding that earth can be shaped, that fire transforms it, that the object must be dried and heated carefully to avoid cracking. This implies a cultural tradition, a passing down of knowledge, a society with at least some division of labor and perhaps even ritual or artistic expression. What would such a society look like? We can only speculate. They might have lived in small, mobile bands, their world dominated by megafauna like the giant sloth or the saber-toothed cat. Their tools would likely be of stone and bone, but now we must add carefully crafted clay figurines to that inventory. Were these objects toys, religious icons, tokens of identity? The very act of creating a representation of the human form suggests a level of symbolic thought, of self-awareness, that we reserve for much later in our evolutionary timeline. This speculative society leaves no other trace, no hearths, no villages, no middens of garbage. They become ghosts, their entire civilization reduced to a single, stubborn artifact. The implications ripple outward, shaking the foundations of every related field. It would mean human creativity and exploration are not the products of a recent, rapid evolution, but innate traits with roots in a deep, misty past. It suggests that the peopling of the planet happened not once, in a neat wave 15,000 years ago, but in multiple, forgotten waves across millions of years, each potentially ending in extinction, leaving behind only the faintest, most enigmatic clues. This is the revolutionary, and for mainstream science, the utterly unbelievable consequence of taking the Nampa figurine at its word. It does not ask for a slight adjustment to our models. It demands we burn them down and start anew, with the humbling acknowledgement that the human journey is far older, stranger, and more mysterious than we have ever conceived. Across the Atlantic, another tool was waiting in stone. In 1936, near the town of London, Texas, a couple hiking along a creek bed made a startling find. Partially embedded in a large, solid rock was the wooden handle of what appeared to be an ordinary hammer. They broke the stone open to reveal a complete iron hammerhead, its handle partially coalified, turned to a stony substance. This is the London hammer, and its discovery story mirrors Nampa's in its unsettling simplicity. A modern-looking tool was found encased in rock dated by geologists to the Cretaceous period, over 100 million years old, a time when dinosaurs ruled the Earth. Here again was an artifact impossibly out of its time, a man-made object sealed inside a geological era that predates humans by tens of millions of years. The parallels between the two discoveries are striking. Both were found not by archaeologists but by ordinary people engaged in mundane activity, drilling for water in Idaho, taking a walk in Texas. Both artifacts were discovered in the American West, far from the traditional cradles of ancient civilization, and both presented the same maddening contradiction, a familiar object in a profoundly unfamiliar context. The materials tell a similar tale of defiance. The Nampa figurine is fired clay, a technology that should not exist in its stratum. The London hammer is made of iron, a metal humans learned to smelt only a few thousand years ago, yet it was found in rock from the age of reptiles. The wooden handle had undergone a process of petrification, where organic material slowly turns to stone, a transformation that typically requires immense spans of time. This detail seemed to lock the hammer into its ancient matrix, making the idea of a recent insertion seem as unlikely as the figurine falling through solid basalt. Each artifact, in its own way, became a physical riddle that conventional history could not solve, a small, hard knot of evidence that refused to be untangled by the standard timeline. The debates that erupted around each object also followed a familiar rhythm. For the London hammer, the immediate skeptical explanation was that it was a miner's tool from the 1800s, left behind and somehow became encased in the rock through a natural process of mineral accretion. Proponents pointed to the local history of iron mining in the area, suggesting the hammer could have been dropped and then rapidly coated in a hard, stony deposit of limonite, a type of iron ore. This process, known as concretion, can happen relatively quickly under the right chemical conditions, creating a hard shell that mimics ancient stone. It is the Texas equivalent of the Nampa drilling error theory, a perfectly rational, mundane explanation that preserves the conventional timeline. Yet, like the figurine, the hammer has its defenders. They argue that the petrification of the wood handle is genuine and could not have occurred in a mere century. They point to analysis suggesting the iron of the hammerhead is unusually pure, lacking the slag typical of 19th century smelting, and that the rock encasing it is indeed Cretaceous limestone. The back and forth is a perfect echo, a dance of claim and counterclaim where geology, chemistry, and human testimony are wielded by both sides. Mainstream science, applying Occam's razor with firm consistency, overwhelmingly favors the modern tool explanation for the hammer, just as it favors the hoax or contamination theory for the figurine. In both cases, the institutions of archaeology and geology have filed the objects away as curiosities, not catalysts for revolution. This pattern of dismissal is not a conspiracy, it is the standard protocol for anomalies. When a single item contradicts a mountain of established evidence, the burden of proof is astronomically high, and the simplest explanation wins by default. The London hammer and the Nampa figurine stand together in this scientific purgatory, acknowledged but not accepted, explained away but never fully explained. Examining these parallel mysteries side by side does something important. It shifts our focus from the artifacts themselves to the pattern they create. We stop asking just about a clay doll or an iron hammer and start asking about the phenomenon they represent. Why do these out-of-place artifacts keep appearing? Is it a series of incredible coincidences and misunderstandings, or is it a signal of something fundamentally missing from our historical model? The process is always the same: discovery, initial awe, scientific scrutiny, the rise of a conventional debunking theory, and then a long, slow fade into the realm of fringe speculation. This life cycle reveals less about ancient history and more about how we, as a culture, process the unknown. We are drawn to the mystery, the possibility of a hidden truth, but our systems of knowledge are built on stability and consensus. An artifact that forces a paradigm shift cannot do so alone. It needs an army of corroborating evidence behind it. Neither the figurine nor the hammer has that army. They are lone scouts reporting back from a territory we have not yet mapped. Their greatest lesson may be a lesson in humility. They remind us that the past is not a neatly solved puzzle, but a vast landscape where a single unexpected find can still open a chasm of questions. While science rightly demands more than a scout's report to redraw the map, these objects ensure we never become so confident in our charts that we stop looking at the horizon. They are permanent reminders that the story of our world and our place within it might still have missing pages waiting to be found, or perhaps waiting to be understood. This philosophical impasse is the true legacy of the Nampa figurine. Without the physical object to test, we are left arguing not about facts, but about faith in a different kind of testimony, the written reports from a century and a half ago. The core question becomes a matter of intellectual responsibility. Where does the burden of proof truly lie in a case like this? The famous principle, popularized by astronomer Carl Sagan, states that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. A 2-million-year-old human artifact in Idaho is about as extraordinary a claim as one can make. So, has that extraordinary evidence been provided? For those who believe the figurine is genuine, the answer is a firm yes. They point to the detailed, sworn accounts of the drillers and the respected geologist George Frederick Wright, who personally investigated. This was not a vague story told over a campfire. It was documented in engineering logs and published in a scientific journal. The evidence, they argue, was extraordinary for its time, and the fact that it has not been conclusively debunked after all these years speaks to its enduring power. The burden of proof from this perspective has been met. It is now up to the skeptics to definitively explain how the artifact could be a hoax given the specific geological constraints described. They shift the burden back onto mainstream science, challenging it to disprove a well-documented observation rather than simply dismissing it. The skeptics, however, hold a fundamentally different view. They argue that the original evidence, while detailed, is simply not extraordinary enough to support such a world-shattering conclusion. 19th-century geology, though advanced for its era, was not the forensic science of today. Drill logs could be misinterpreted, layers could be misidentified, and human error, whether accidental or intentional, was always a possibility. The standard of evidence required to rewrite human history must be unimpeachable, involving multiple lines of corroborating proof, like consistent findings from other sites of similar age. A single, poorly understood report from one well in Idaho cannot bear that weight. For them, the burden of proof remains squarely and forever on those making the extraordinary claim. Since the claim cannot be verified with modern methods due to the artifact's disappearance, it must remain in the category of an intriguing but unproven story, not a historical fact. This is why the case is locked in a perfect, frustrating stalemate. Believers point to the original reports as a solid foundation. Skeptics demand modern verification that the missing figurine makes impossible. Each side is waiting for the other to provide something that can no longer be found or never existed in the first place. The debate circles endlessly, not around the artifact itself, but around our trust in historical documentation and our standards for truth. It forces us to ask, when does a mystery become a myth, and when does a dismissed report become a lost piece of history? The figurine, by its very absence, ensures we may never know, leaving us forever weighing the word of a few men from 1889 against the entire accumulated narrative of human origins. The Nampa figurine endures because it is a perfect storm of unanswered questions. Who precisely was the artist? The figurine's simple form offers no inscription, no cultural fingerprint we can recognize. It is a face without a name, a creation without a context. This anonymity fuels endless speculation, from early Native American craftsmen to visitors from a forgotten epoch. The second question is geological. How did a solid object come to rest 320 feet beneath the surface, sealed under a fortress of basalt? The proposed explanations, from a drilling accident to a deliberate hoax, all stumble against the stubborn details of the original report. Each theory solves one part of the puzzle while leaving another piece glaringly out of place. Then comes the most haunting question of all. Why is there no other evidence? If humans were present in Idaho 2 million years ago, or even 20,000, where are their tools, their hearts, their remains? A single figurine is a whisper in a silent hall. It suggests a presence but offers no proof of a people, a culture, or a sustained life. This profound isolation is what makes mainstream science so deeply skeptical. Anomalies are one thing, but a civilization leaves footprints, and here we find only a single tiny toe print. Finally, there is the modern mystery. Why was the artifact lost to science? Its journey into a private collection feels like a curtain falling on the final act. That disappearance prevents any chance of closure. We cannot test it, so we cannot dismiss it. We cannot verify it, so we cannot confirm it. This lack of a modern verdict is perhaps the most powerful ingredient in its longevity. The story combines a credible discovery from a civil engineering project, a clear and documented geological contradiction, and a maddening absence of final answers. It is a detective story where the key witness vanished, leaving only a cryptic statement behind. we are left with a puzzle that is fundamentally unsolvable with the pieces we have, and that is precisely why we cannot stop turning it over in our hands, examining it from every angle, hoping to glimpse a pattern in the fragments. From a deep well in Idaho to the very edges of human history, this tiny figure has traveled a long road. We have followed its journey from the gritty hands of a 19th century driller to the polished desks of skeptical scientists, through layers of blue clay and basalt, and into the heart of a debate that remains perfectly, frustratingly balanced. The evidence presents us with two stark and irreconcilable possibilities. On one hand, we have a genuine artifact, a ghost from the deep past that forces us to reconsider everything we know about when humans arrived in the Americas, and perhaps even what it means to be human. On the other, we have an elaborate mistake, a combination of geological confusion and human error that created a compelling illusion from a simple clay doll. There is no comfortable middle ground, no neat resolution waiting in the data. The Nampa Figurine demands we choose a side, to place our trust either in the meticulous reports of the past or in the overwhelming consensus of the present. This enduring standoff is its true power. Our lasting fascination with this object reveals something profound about our own relationship with history. We crave a complete, orderly narrative, a textbook timeline we can follow with confidence. Yet discoveries like this whisper that the past is always more mysterious, more ragged at the edges, and potentially far more complex than any single story can contain. It reminds us that history is not a solved puzzle, but an ongoing excavation where every new layer can unsettle the ones we thought were solid. So the figurine remains a silent sentinel from 320 feet down. It sits, whether in a museum case or a private drawer, holding its secret tight. It is a permanent question mark shaped from Idaho clay, a challenge cast not in stone, but in something more fragile and more enduring: human curiosity. What do you believe lies at the heart of this mystery? Share your own theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey to the borders of the known past, subscribe for more explorations into history's greatest enigmas.